Warning: Kingdom Death contains mature content, be it in its story themes and or its images. While while videos involving Kingdom Death Monster may not contain specifically mature content in them, the game does, and thus, if these videos generate interest for it, you've been warned that that is what it will lead to. If this does not bother you, please enjoy the video. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this board game overview for Kingdom Death Monsters Principles. These are the base things that tell what your settlement does, how it does it, how they live their lives. These are basically their laws. Again, this is going to be a lot of spoilers here, as I will be also listing off the story events, my thoughts on the actual principles themselves, and what they specifically do. As a couple heads up notes, protect the young and survival of the fittest are triggered by your first intimacy event successfully, so your first newborn. I did forget to say this in the video, and also this is my first time attempting to use footage of recording directly into of the book, and I apologize from the glare. I will need to come up with a better setup for that next time, but regardless, let's get to the info. Here we go.
Alright, now we're starting off with Principal Death. So, this is triggered when you have your first death and are at the settlement. As in, it doesn't need to be at the settlement, but if it happens during the hunt or the showdown, you don't get the benefit of this. In fact, you don't get the benefit of any of these until you're in the settlement. So, the group must decide what to do with the first survivor corpse. And then, of course, that is either the first harvest or the first grave. Now, if you pick the first harvest, so this is cannibalized, as it says, the settlement decides to harvest the body for resources and gain the principal death principle cannibalize. Find and place the card on the settlement board and note it on the settlement record sheet. I'm not going to reread that, by the way, for all the rest of these, because that's how it is for all of them. Gain X or Y and then record it. And then all of these also have roll a d10. In the case of this one, on a 1 through 5, the settlement ritualistically divides the corpse with a sharp stone and grimly consumes the dead flesh. Gain a founding stone starting gear, and all departing survivors will gain 3 insanity. And then on a 6 through 10, nominate a survivor. The survivor frantically tears the corpse open and deeply drinks its blood. They decide that for every new creature they eat, they will become stronger. Now, cannibalize itself is a +1 survival limit, and whenever a survivor dies, draw 1 basic resource and add it to the settlement storage. Do not gain a resource if the survivor is lost, ceased to exist, or exiled. So, basically, this is a nice way to gain resources and is very good with that whole survival limit bonus, as Graves does not apply that. I'm not a big fan of cannibalism. I prefer Graves, but I'll get to my comparison of the two later. But otherwise, if you think you're going to die a lot and need the resources more, you go with this one. Now, if you picked First Grave, the settlement decides to build a small monument to mark their losses, and you gain Graves. Again, roll a d10. The settlement gathers around the graves, and each taking a moment to reflect the loss and their place in the darkness. All departing survivors gain 1 survival and 1 understanding. The understanding's very nice there. But the latter effect, the 6 through 10, I think is much better. Nominate a survivor with tears in their eyes. The survivor takes a sharp rock from the grave and marks themselves with it. They cherish this mark forever, +1 permanent luck. And then, of course, there's the grave card itself. Now, as you can see, no survival limit, no departing survival. I don't think any of these actually give departing survival. But all new survivors, not just newborn, but all new survivors will gain +1 understanding. When the survivor dies during the hunt or showdown phase, gain 2 endeavors. When they die during the settlement phase, gain 1 endeavor. So this means you should end up gaining 2 per death, assuming you're counting the one from returning and then somebody dies. I think this is a much better card for the two. So, when we have both, though, cannibalism does have its merits, but I think Graves is so much better with both the +1 understanding to all new survivors, and then also, it's a lot easier to rebuild with endeavors than it is resources, And finally, if you total party wipe on a butcher, cannibalism does nothing because the resources go immediately to the settlement, which, FYI, means that they are not removed from the deck and thus you can keep getting them, which is great for people of the skull because it's potential to just get skulls over and over again. But as I was saying, the butcher destroys all resources, so this results in a just blank slate, like as if you didn't have anything. And again, as a final statement, neither of these take place on the deaths that trigger them, only deaths following it. Next up, we have Principal New Life. The group must decide how to raise their young. Choose one, of course, without mercy or with affection. If you pick without mercy, the toys are taken from the children and replaced with a cold, stone-faced shard. Training begins immediately. The settlement gains, well, survival of the fittest. And then roll a d10, as per usual. On a 1 through 5, the settlement celebrates with a rowdy party, filled with tests of strength and triumph roaring. The parents each gain +1 permanent strength and +2 insanity. They must skip the next hunt. On a 6 through 10, the child is raised as a pure warrior, leaving compassion and fear behind. The newborn survivor gains +2 courage, the tough fighting art, and 1 random disorder. And then, of course, there is the actual principle itself, survival of the fittest. Survival limit +1. When rolling on intimacy, story event, roll twice and pick the lowest of the results. All current and newborn survivors gain +1 strength, +1 evasion, and a roll of once per lifetime. A survivor may reroll a single roll result. They must keep the new result. Keep in mind, people you find do not gain the +1 strength, +1 evasion. That's just newborns from there on out. If you found them and then get this, yeah, they get the bonus then, but that's because they're already part of it. Now, if you picked with affection, the settlement embraces the child with warm arms. Nurturing new life is their highest calling, and this is protect the young. On a 1 through 5, the settlement gathers around the newborn in awe. Never have they seen something so precious and meaningful. The parents each gain +2 survival and +1 permanent evasion. Very nice. And then on a 6 through 10, the child, or children, because twins is possible, is raised by the entire settlement and endowed with the hopes and wisdoms of all. The newborn survivor gains +2 understanding and the strategist fighting art. So on a 6 through 10, both gain a fighting art, but it is possible with Graves to have a +3 understanding character immediately. And then, of course, Protect the Young itself is just very simple. The children are the future. When rolling on Intimacy story event, roll twice and pick 1 result. And then as a comparison, here are the two both on screen at once. Honestly, these are a very black and white difference. Neither are bad, and depending on your population early on, the choice becomes a lot easier. If you rolled very high on the starting event, or waited till you got more people before you started Intimacy, which is very possible, then Survival of the Fittest is preferred. But if you're low, Protect the Young is definitely preferred. Like, if you have 6 or less, you want to go with this. Personally, when push comes to shove, like, say, high numbers or place, like, these change play styles pretty much. I prefer Survival of the Fittest, mainly because this also affects a lot of things in the hunt events of stuff you wouldn't survive unless you are Survival of the Fittest. Not to mention the +1 strength and +1 evasion is very nice. But you have to be managing your characters right. You shouldn't be doing Intimacy without face painting for that +1 to remove the chance of both parents dying. And honestly, it makes the game harder for gaining people, but it makes it easier for the people you have to stay alive. While Protect the Young doesn't give you anything towards survival. To my knowledge, it doesn't even alter any events or anything, at least not in a positive manner, although I don't think any of the principles alter them in really negative manners. And they might, but that's just off the top of my head. Most of the altering events, by the way, I will be covering with said events. Regardless, while I prefer Survival of the Fittest, I know a lot of my friends prefer Protect the Young, and it really comes down to a personal playstyle. Next up, Principal Society. There was once a woman who spent her days talking to the darkness. One day, it spoke back. The group must choose one. Either Collective Toil or accept the darkness. If you pick Collective Toil, Tainted by the darkness, a survivor nearly brought ruin to the settlement. On the day of her exile, the people decided that all must spend equal time hunting and working to avoid future disasters. A -1 population and add Bone Witch to the timeline 3 years from now. Bone Witch gets added pretty much any time you exile somebody through an event, by the way. And you gain Collective Toil. Roll a d10, and for once, in the only time out of the base principles, it's not on a 1 through 5 and 6 through 10. On a 1 through 3, all survivors gain survival up to the survival limit. Not that good, honestly, unless you're playing late game and, when you hit that 15 population, which, sorry, I did not say so earlier, is the trigger to this. Unless you have a really high survival limit, it sucks. Compared to the 4 through 10, which is why it's such a greater number. 3 unknown survivors with ink-stained eyes drag a monster's corpse into the settlement. Upon seeing the united settlement, they offer the corpse as a tribute and plead for their lives. Gain +3 population, 2 random White Lion resources, and a Skull resource. Amazing for people to Skull, but honestly, this is just great in general. The first time that I did Principal Society Collective Toil, this is what I got. Now, speaking of Collective Toil itself, Collective Toil, as a principle, is your settlement leans into the storm. If everyone holds strong, you will triumph. At the start of the settlement phase, gain +1 endeavor for every 10 population. Assuming you don't lose somehow 6 people after getting this, the next year you will have at least 1 bonus endeavor. This pretty much just encourages you to increase your population as much as you can and then take advantage of it. If you don't have use for the endeavors, I don't recommend this, but you never know, really, especially with future expansions. Now, if you picked Accept the Darkness spoke startling truths. It told the people they were monsters, just like the ones they hunted. The people accepted their monstrosity and their place stalking in the darkness. Gain principle, accept darkness. Back to the 1 through 5 and 6 through 10. On a 1 through 5, nominate 4 survivors. They each gain 10 insanity. Meh. And on a 6 through 10, nominate a female survivor. If you can't, nominate a male survivor instead. The survivor is heralded as the settlement's leader. Gain the quixotic disorder, which is actually a good disorder. It cannot be removed for any reason. In addition, gain leader and orator death fighting art. So this is actually really nice, honestly, because with that latter result, because you get one really awesome character, especially if you hand them drums. And then, accept the darkness itself. The settlement no longer fears the darkness. Letting go means resolve cannot be cracked. Add +2 to all brain trauma rolls. So I have yet to cover the brain trauma table, or the injury table for that matter, but this pretty much means you can't auto-die from brain trauma until you have 3 disorders. But you can't roll anything lower than a 3 is the point. Now, as a comparison, unless you have the high population put out, I'm always going to recommend Accept the Darkness. Collective Toil and Accept the Darkness I know can modify certain things, especially murder, but really, I just like the fact that this increases your survival capability all that much more. While this just means you recover better from the smaller losses. Lastly, we have Principal Conviction. You unlock this after surviving any of the settlement events that come from Lantern Year 12, or anything else along those lines. It's the event of that lantern year. Survivors must find a reason to be, treasure darkness in all its mastery, or seek to master it and grow stronger. And of course, the group must choose one. To either master the darkness, life is finding the perfect death. The lantern is power. By its light, all will be led to the final glorious moment. This will re-add the Hands of Heat to the next year around the timeline, meaning you'll be doing the feast, unless you've lost and have not regained Lantern Oven. And this is for Barbaric. So, you then roll a d10 as always, still with the 50-50, on a 1 through 5. Settlement celebrates with a destructive feast. Lose all resources, including the storage. If 10 or more resources were lost this way, departing survivors gain +1 permanent speed and the Honorable Disorder. On a 6 through 10, nominate a survivor. They gain 4 courage and the following ability.
Thundercall. Once per lifetime on a hunt board space after overwhelming darkness. In place of rolling a random hunt event, use 100 as your result, which is the finale. I'll get to that when I get to the actual hunt events themselves. Now, if you choose Treasure a Mystery, life is a quickly fading lantern. Every precious moment must be lived to its absolute fullest. You had the Bone Witch, which has been able to come up twice by now, I believe, assuming you've gotten Principle Society by now. This is the Romantic Conviction Principle, and as per usual, roll a d10. On a 1 through 5, the settlement celebrates with an excessive feast. Lose all resources. If 10 or more resources were lost this way, departing survivors gain +1 permanent luck and the Prey Disorder. And on a 6 through 10, nominated survivor gain 4+ understanding and the following ability: Legend Caller. Once per lifetime on a hunt board space after overwhelming darkness, in place of rolling a random hunt event, use 53 as your result, which is Masked Salesman. Now, for the 2 cards themselves, we have, of course, Barbaric and Romantic. They both gain a survival limit of 1. Barbaric says, believe in the power of human strength to overpower any obstacle. All current and newborn survivors gain +1 permanent strength. This is basically in Survival of the Fittest improved, and does stack with it. Keep in mind, this is also not including people that you add later through reasons other than being newborn. And for Romantic, believe in the potential of beauty, decency, and ingenuity in others. When you gain a random fighting art, draw 3 fighting art cards and select 1 to keep. Now, honestly, just baseline, I prefer Barbaric. For the same kind of reasons that I prefer Survival of the Fittest. Far more to the point bonuses, but this one doesn't affect the game as a whole nearly as much as Survival of the Fittest. But there are some things that are affected. Certain other events, their dice tables, are changed based on this. Also, there are some armor sets that are coming up or are promos to begin with, such as the Beyond and Before the Wall promo sets, which I believe you can only use it if your settlement is Romantic. But otherwise, either one you really go with, the initial choice isn't going to make a huge difference. It's, do you want the permanent strength or do you want more choice with fighting arts?
Alright everyone, thank you for watching. I hope that was helpful. If it was, feel free to like this video. If you think it will help somebody else, feel free to share this video. If this video wasn't helpful or you didn't like it, go ahead and press that dislike button, but please try to leave a constructive comment as to why. Also, feel free to comment in general, and if you'd like to see more like this, be it more on board game overview videos, my unboxing videos, or my painting videos, all of which I'm trying to do more Kingdom Death, especially since Wave 2 should be here soon enough. Feel free to subscribe. Regardless, thank you for watching and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.